Retros, since Mario Kart DS, or Super Circuit if you count it, have become a staple to the Mario Kart series. So with Mario Kart 8 being completed and a new console on the way, at least according to all these random Switch channels going around, I thought it would be a good idea to create my own retro tracks list for the next game. I've spent a lot of time crafting a good balance of difficulty, game variety, aesthetics and popularity within these tracks in order to come up with the perfect set of Mario Kart retros. Before we start, I just want to quickly make a shout out to, well, myself. This is the first video of my channel, so if you find my sexy content enjoyable, make sure to subscribe. I'm going to focus this channel around the history and different aspects of certain Mario Kart tracks, and I already have a few in mind. If you have a Mario Kart track you want me to talk about in a video, make sure to leave it in the comments, and let's begin. So when I started making this list, I decided upon 25 tracks with 5 cups. It would just be like Super Mario Kart. This as the 10th game, because yes people, Mario Kart Tour is mainline, would be a nice callback to the origins of Mario Kart as a 10th game. It would also give us more tracks which you can never complain about, and if they did a DLC, they could release 25 more Nitros and 25 more Retros to market the game as having 100 tracks. So I started the list off with the Shell Cup like every game that Retros have done before, and chose GCN Luigi Circuit. You may be saying, hasn't Luigi Circuit already returned in DS? Well, yes my viewers, it has. This isn't a big deal to me personally though, as the amount of retro choices that we have never returned in Wii and previous games is very slim now, meaning frankly Nintendo doesn't have many choices left, and will probably bring some older ones back a second or even a third time. So when making this selection, I prioritised tracks that have never returned, but I ignored the Booster Course Pass, as I believe if they're working on a Mario Kart X, which they are, then they probably started it before the Booster Course Pass was even conceptualised, and they just ignored it. So this also means a lot of Tour's selection isn't in this roster. I didn't add any cities, as I find it a little jarring to go from Boston Building to Mario Circuit to the middle of Nepal, but I did keep some Mario themed tracks that originated from Tour. So with all this explaining out of the way, we can now fully get into the list, which includes the second track of the selection being Vanilla Lakes from the SNES. Wait, plural? Oh, for God's sake, I've got more explaining to do. Oh, perfect. This will really hold retention now, won't it? So, since the SNES tracks are short, basic, and have multiple variants, I mashed both of the Vanilla Lakes together into one slot, as they kind of have a Tour version where each lap is different. So moving on to track 3 of the Shell Cup, which is Wii U Front Ruins. Personally, I think this track has a really unique aesthetic, and is more enjoyable than most Mushroom Cup tracks, so it goes here. The fourth track though is a fan favourite, being Toad's Factory from Wii. Going from the nature of Vanilla Lake and Front Ruins to a heavy industrialised factory feels like a good blend for this cup, and frankly if Toad's Factory doesn't make it into the game, everyone will riot, me at the front of it. So finally, for the Shell Cup, we have a Tour original being Piranha Plant Pipeline. Now stay with me here people, okay? This track honestly feels difficult but easy at the same time. I mean, it's definitely not Shell Cup level how it's implemented in Tour, but I can see this track being widened with the pipes and becoming a fairly easy track. It just feels like a solid conclusion to a solid cup. So next up we have the Banana Cup, which premieres with 3DS Daisy Hills. This track was the last one I decided upon on this list, and it actually took the spot of Luigi's Mansion before I adjusted the cup orderings, as Daisy Hills had never returned, and Boston Building has returned in Mario Kart 7. I needed a nice calming track in order to pace the difficulty, and the peaceful vibes of this track nail that. SNES Mario Circuits are next, and they are getting the same treatment as Vanilla Lake, starting with Mario Circuit 1 in lap 1, Mario Circuit 2 in lap 2, and Mario Circuit 3 and 4 in lap 3. So the next track is also one that returned previously, being DS Delfino Square. I mean, this track isn't very likely compared to some of the others, as it came back in Wii, but it's my personal favourite track in the entire series, so it's kinda just biased from my end. Next up is GBA Broken Pier, which was another late choice for me, but we needed a spooky aesthetic that was still fairly simple, and Broken Pier has never returned, so let's just squish that in there and hope it doesn't stand out. You know the list is about to be stacked when you get to the end of Cup 2 and it's still on the Mushroom Cup. So I concluded this one with Shy Guy Bazaar from Mario Kart 7, as it's another fan favourite but with the difficulty to move up a cup. The windy turns and the Arabian theming isn't anything like what we've seen before in a Mario Kart course. Side note by the way, but I also just want to mention that they planned and scrapped this course for Mario Kart 8 Space Retros, the RG8 DLC, and the Booster Course Pass. Like, if any track's gonna come back next game, I would put my bets on this one. Now we're going into the Leaf Cup. This is where the track selection gets more difficult and more interesting. The Wii U had a lot of very underrated nitro tracks that aren't appreciated nearly as much as they should be in my opinion. Sunshine Airport is one of the tracks that suffers the most from this. Being placed in a cup with Electrodrome and Mount Wario and Dolphin Shoals, it kind of makes it difficult for any track to stand out, but I see them adding this one and saving those two as the big hitters for the next game. Or a potential DLC. The first of two 64 tracks is coming up next, being Frappe Snowland. Only one track hasn't returned from that game so far, so I added this track too as a nice middle ground for the retros. I also just want to point out that I have added 2 desert and 2 snow tracks into the roster, as there's 25 total tracks, so there's enough variety for me to have 2 of each. Hence Vanilla Lake already was added as a snow track, with this one being the second. The next choice is probably my most controversial on the entire list. It's Wii Maple Treeway. I already see my 2 viewers basically breaking their phones over this one. Yes, this track did return in 7, and then we also had it in the Booster Course Pass, but what do you want from me? We had 11 tracks from Wii added into Mario Kart 8, and 2 of the ones we have left are circuit tracks. So if you want any Wii representation, then you've got to take a Booster Course Pass choice. Or just Bowser's Castle, but I didn't choose Wii's Bowser's Castle, so spoilers guys. Next is another fan favourite being Wario's Shipyard from Mario Kart 7. It was a crime this track didn't return in 8 as it's one of the few water tracks that isn't just a beach or some basic environment. You can never go wrong with a Wario track anyways, you'll see by how many I added into the retros I chose. Next is my only choice from the original 8 DLC, Dragon Driftway. I personally didn't see them adding more than one, and while there were lots of good choices here, Dragon Driftway made the most sense to me. All the collab tracks with other Nintendo IP were cool, but I don't see this game becoming a full Nintendo kart or anything, hence those and the Woohoo Island tracks have been left out. As for Super Bell Subway, we also had a similar track with Sunshine Airport, and out of Wild Woods and Dragon Driftway, this is just my favourite of the 2. So now we're on to the 4th cup that's been added to accommodate the typical 4. I call this cup the Coin Cup, as it's become very iconic as an item and it just makes sense to me. Starting the Coin Cup, we have GBA Lakeside Park. I was a dummy when I first made my first draft of this list, and I actually placed it in the Shell Cup. This would have made literally no sense as it was in the Special Cup in Super Circuit, but oh well. Yoshi's Island from Tor is one of the tracks I still see talked about from the Booster Course Pass. The theming is great as a reference to the games of the same name, and even though the little cloud thingy is a pain to get, because I can never predict its movement, it's still a very fun and unique feature to the track. Wario Stadium, Wario Stadium, Wario Stadium. This track is literally the neglected middle child of Nintendo. Even worse, I think it's been trapped in the Nintendo headquarters basement for multiple decades now. I mean, this track knows what it's like to be picked last in PE, or to watch all of your friends be picked up from school and realise your parents forgot you. It even got replaced in Wii and DS by Wario and Waluigi Stadium respectively. We're finally giving this track what it needs by giving it a spot in the Coin Cup. But we're now gonna flip this scene and add one of Nintendo's golden children, Airship Fortress. I mean, everyone loves this track, at least when it has the void instead of lava. But they really can't go wrong with this pick. I could have added Waluigi Pinball or a different fan favourite track from DS here, but we needed a more tricky one. And to be honest, I think Airship is the most popular track in that game, despite its many bangers that could compete. Ending the 4th cup is GCN Mushroom City, which is one I'm really surprised we haven't seen return yet. I mean, it would have fit perfect in the Mario Kart 7 retros, as Neo Bowser City as a Nitro was the closest we had to a city track in that game, and everyone knows Neo Bowser City sucks anyways, and we all just pretend to enjoy it because we like to be annoying. Right guys? Right? So we're down to the final cup. The cup so special that they named it the Special Cup. Wait, that's the Nitro. It's the Lightning Cup. My bad. Dry Ruins is first accompanying Shy Guy Bazaar for Desert Retros, and was conveniently not mentioned when I spoke about the tracks that didn't return from Wii in 8. I think this track is pretty creative, even for Wii standards, going inside of pyramids and around different styles of the desert. It's a very fun yet tricky track. I added one more tour track, being Ski Clean Sprint. I'm sure I'm not the only one here, but I'm a sucker for tracks which are just shrinking the driver into a normal environment. Ribbon Road was great in Super Circuit, and Squeaky Clean Sprint was great in Tour. Now we just need a garden and a kitchen track to accommodate these ones, and we're all set. My third Wario track in 3 cups is Wario Coliseum from Double Dash, and this is another one that surprised me to not have been added yet. It's such a unique gimmick going around a giant metal ball, and really does feel like something you'd see in an extreme sports show. This track could have been just perfect in Wii, with bikes being so prominent, but as I imagine bikes would still be included in the next Mario Kart game, it makes sense as an inclusion here. So we're just down to the Bowser's Castle and the Rainbow's Road. I personally believe that the Rainbow Road is a pretty obvious choice, but Bowser's Castle isn't so much. I mean, looking through all the viable options, we have Bowser's Castle 4 from Super Mario Kart, any of the 3 Bowser's Castles from Super Circuit, or the GCN, DS, Wii and 7 versions. I don't see 8 coming back instantly, and the others have been added previously in the other retro selections. So out of these options, I went with DS Bowser's Castle. Yes, Bowser Castle with no S. I don't know why, but this version isn't owned by Bowser, but just named after him according to its name. So maybe he went through like a rough patch in his finances or something and had to let the castle go. I'm not sure, but either way, this is such a fun track with the spinny floor thing, the spinny tower thing, and the spinny beam thing, and the spinny plate thing. I think Bowser just spent all his budget on circles and then had no money left for the castle. That's probably it. So finally, we have the Rainbow Road, and the only correct choice is the GBA edition. Mario Kart 7 was the first game with a retro Rainbow Road, and they did the SNES one, and 8 followed up with 64. So logically, if it continues in chronological order, it's got to be the GBA version. They could throw a curveball and be like, here's 8 Rainbow Road or something, but I don't see that. There's a high demand for Super Circuit anyways, add a difficult layout while having those weird bouncy sides that were super fun to try use while not falling off. Overall, this track just feels like the only option they could use, and feels like the perfect ending. So that's my list of all 25 retros. Overall, I included 2 tracks from the SNES, 2 from 64, and 3 from every other game, if you count Dragon Drift Race being from 8. So I think this was a balanced list and has the potential to predict the majority of the retros we'll see in the next game. With this said though, make sure to comment where I went right, wrong, and leave your thoughts as well as tracks I should talk about in a future video. This video was a one-off style where I talk about a wider Mario Kart topic, but I will return and make more Mario Kart X predictions, including the characters, items, and Nitro tracks if you guys show enough support for it. So make sure to do that.